speakers. We have two. Matt is here. Let's see, where is Amy? Amy, where are you?
You lost Amy again.
Oh no, she's coming.
Gotta love technology.
Yeah, she's coming. There she is. Hey, Amy. Hello, audience. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited about this event. That's going to be a lot of fun. I have those amazing speakers here today to talk about buyer intent data with some. They are the brightest mind. They are the brightest minds in the business. So feel free to share, audience, where you're calling from into the chat. We love to hear from you. And while you're sharing, I have a quick icebreaker to ask my speakers. So since today is skip day, one extra day of the year, I want to know, speakers, if you could have 1 extra hour on your day every single day, what would you do with that hour? Let me start with Drew.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I don't think there would be anything more impactful on my overall health and performance besides adding an extra hour of sleep.
I
Honestly, I
was
think that's what that would
that
have
was
the
my
most
answer too.
effect.
1 extra hour sleep sounds amazing. What about you, Chris? What would you do?
So an extra hour of sleep sounds amazing, but I'm gonna go with the corny answer. So I have an 8-month-old daughter at home, and getting to spend an extra hour of the day with her would be amazing. So I'm lucky enough I get to work from home quite a bit, so I get to sneak upstairs every now and again during the day to say hello. But that extra hour I think would be a game changer for me.
That's cute. Just playing and spending time with the daughter. That's very cute. What about you, Amy? If you could have 1 extra hour, what would you do?
I would probably split the time between more yoga. I do yoga
Mhm.
every day, but more yoga and reading more.
Yeah, that's productive. Uh, yeah, that sounds very productive. Better than sleeping, I would say. What about you, Matt?
If I had an hour extra today, I would fix my Wi-Fi issues that seem to continue to pop up. But going forward in general, kind of in that yoga frame, I would definitely do some sort of thing for my health. So an extra hour of like, yeah, yoga or working out or something. And would I really do it? Who knows? But that would be my mindset.
I like those answers. But let's be honest, I think we will all work 1 extra hour in the day if we had this extra hour. Awesome, thank you. Audience, thank you for telling us where you're calling from. We have a poll today. Let me put this poll open into the screen right now. So audience, please go into the poll tab on the right-hand side and let us know, do you have personal experience with buyer intent data? We want to hear from you. I am going to let this poll open while I do my quick introduction here. So my name is Eduardo. I am a marketing manager at Modern Sales Pros, and we are here today to talk about buyer intent data with those amazing speakers. Um, we got a fantastic lineup today discussing this topic, and these are the kind of insights you won't find just anywhere, only here at Modern Sales Pros. And for those new here, welcome to Modern Sales Pros. We are the world's largest and finest community for more than 35,000 members in sales management, leadership, operations, and enablement. We are all about taking the road less traveled and bringing you along for the journey. And our mission is to help you tackle tough questions and discover opportunities you might not even know exist. We do this through vibrant sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have an engaging online forum and our must attend quarterly summits. We have one next week. I'm going to drop a link into the chat pretty soon. And we are doing a lot of in-person events nationwide this year. So if we have an event near you this year, let us know and you will get an invitation. If you're not part of the MSP yet, you will receive an invitation to join the club right after this event. And as I mentioned, we have the quarterly summits and we have one next week. So you cannot miss the chance to join more than 60 speakers. We have Nick Mata from Gainsight, we have Manny Medina from Outreach, we have Richard Harris, all speaking on the summit. So you will have access to all those fantastic speakers. I just dropped a link into the chat for you to RSVP for this event right now. But now let's focus on this event. Somebody asked in the chat earlier, we are recording this and you will receive an email later today with the link for the recording. And I was talking with the speakers backstage and they were saying like, Thursday, they're getting tired. It's almost the end of the week. And I ask, what can energize you? And they said, we want to receive a lot of questions. So I see we already have a big question in the chat, but audience, please feel free to go into the Q&A panel and send us a lot of questions. The speakers need your energy today to get through Friday. So this is the housekeeping. And one thing I want to mention, MSP has the best partners ever. And partnering with us today, we have Sales Intel. I have Amy here from Sales Intel. Amy, would you introduce yourself and let us know a little bit what Sales Intel is about?
Absolutely. Thanks, Eduardo. Thrilled to be here. My name is Amy Couts. I'm the Director of Sales Enablement at Sales Intel. But I carried a bag and a quota for about 15 years before getting into enablement. So all of you sellers out there, I know how hard your job is. Sales Intel was founded about 5 years ago, but we've been a backbone in the B2B data community for over a decade. We used to wholesale our first party data to other competitors in our space, and about 5 years ago decided to directly sell our data to the market via a SaaS platform. And we're on a mission. We want to empower go-to-market teams with the highest quality data intelligence and deliver an unparalleled customer experience. So thank you so much.
That sounds fantastic. Audience, we have a requested demo with our sponsor button at the top of this page, and Sales Intel, the team at Sales Intel also put up a booth for you. So there's some stuff in there for you to go check. If you like what you hear here today, please click this button and the Sales Intel team will get in touch with you. Let's hear from the stars of the show. So we have Amy. Amy is going to be our fantastic speaker here today. We also have Chris, Drew, and Matthew. So Chris, would you introduce yourself for the audience, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the Director of Sales and Business Development at Sherpa Events. We do apps and web platforms for typically in-person and hybrid events. I've been selling for, 15 years on the tech side, not so SaaS side, gone from a BDR to leading BDRs to leading salespeople and kind of everything in between. I enjoy also paying it forward. It's my big kind of mantra of wanting to help out others because it took a lot of folks to get me to where I am today. And I want to be able to kind of do that for other people. So that's why I throw out random tips, tricks, and random musings, mostly about coffee on my LinkedIn.
Awesome. I just put your LinkedIn into the chat so the audience can go and connect with you. Let's hear from you, Drew.
Yeah. So I've been about a decade in the B2B SaaS space. Mostly I've been working with startups to help them get from 0 to 1. Most recently, I've been working with companies who are looking to scale. And so currently I'm with Orem, but also I've been doing a lot of consulting business. I've built 3 SDR teams so far, and I've been part of this strategy session, both internally as well as externally. So really fun to talk shop and get really nitty gritty on what strategies are the most impactful for revenue generation. And so I'm really excited to dive into this conversation today.
Awesome. We're excited to have you here. Let's hear from Matthew.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm in Sacramento, California. I jumped into the tech sales world back in 2014. Took a good little gap in between, moved from a BDR to an AE, got pretty burnt out, quit, came back in 2018 and joined Chili Piper, helped scale their sales development team, and then came over to Mosaic about 2.5 years ago, where I've been doing the same. Similar to what's been said, my favorite thing is building from 0 to 1 and seeing that like really early growth. And now I'm sort of in that next phase of continuing to scale into hopefully a Series D.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. I have the results of the poll. So let's start with that. We asked the audience, do you have personal experience with buyer intent data? Half of the people say yes. Half of the people said no. What does that mean? Well, we'll have a good conversation for everyone here. If you have experience with buyer intent data, you're going to learn something new. If you don't, you're going to learn how to get there. Let's start then from the beginning. Let's understand the mystery of buyer intent data. This data tells us who is interested in our products and offer a glimpse into their purchasing intentions. Drew, please lead us off by discussing the types of buyer intent data available out there and which types you have found most beneficial for sales teams.
Yeah, it's very attractive to potentially go towards data that's focused on what individuals are doing. Is somebody searching for your company? Are they searching for your solution? If they're a high-level person and they also happen to have the intent of buying, then you have a phenomenal piece of information. Most of the time, however, that's not the situation. Most of the time, the most impactful data is around the account itself and what you can understand about the profile of that account to understand better if that's the type of company that's going to be the type of company that's going to purchase from you. So you can look at the individual, you can see what they're doing, and that might have an impact, or you can look at the company itself and know that that's the type of company. And really it becomes very specific signals to your selling journey of what it is going to be the most impactful. So if you're selling something that is really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can take a look at what that company is saying about their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, leverage that insight to start a conversation with the appropriate people at the right level. And really that's the purpose of intent data. Are you the right account? And can we leverage that to start a conversation? So if you can stay focused on what's actually going to move the ball forward to the next stage, that's really what's going to be the most impactful overall.
That sounds good. Matt, do you have anything to add what Drew said?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point of tying in not just like the individual prospect, but also the account level. On top of it, I'd say, like buyer intent data has just become more critical as, the years have gone on when we talk about personalization and this lack of mass blasts and spam. We still probably all get emails every single day that are just very generic and there's no reason why they're reaching out to me. Whereas if I'm looking at something online about cold calling, for instance, and next thing you know, someone at Orem or Nooks is reaching out to me, like that obviously is a lot more relevant to my day-to-day. And therefore, to Drew's point, has a much higher likelihood of me responding. So I think, again, like not only is it critical in general, but as we've seen, so many conversations about email deliverability and personalization and relevance, I think it's just something that as we go forward is more and more important.
Yeah, especially in this era of AI, the emails are becoming even more generic and everything is just like, hey, first name, right? Chris, can you expand a little bit on how does this type of data help prioritizing accounts over individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Drew brought up a really great point there where an individual piece of data or an individual doing something isn't necessarily all telling, right? Somebody might be watching this session and might say like, hey, I don't know what Sherpa is. Let me go look it up. That doesn't mean they want to buy. And I think that's what you're missing with a lot of intent data, right? You don't get the why behind it. You just get the action itself. So when you start to add, oh, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6 people at an account, we're starting to get some search scores, they're searching for terms, things like that. Like that's where we can start putting pieces together. So I look at it as a way to enrich the data we already have. We might have our target account list. We know where we're going, who we're going after, but who am I going after first? Well, I want to go after the folks who are actively engaging, who are looking, who are searching right now for something. And then I think to both Drew and Matt's point, it's not a question of, hey, you looked up my company, you want to buy something? It's how do I incorporate that into the current cadence that I have? Am I reaching out? Am I catering my emails, my phone calls to the data that I have and who they are as an account? So it lets you figure out where I should be spending my time. And then it just helps guide you in that process of crafting some catered messaging to it. And I think that just ties into its importance in a lot of like the ABM motions and things like that as well. It's got a huge aspect on that marketing side too.
Sounds good. Amy, I see you nodding. Do you have anything to add to the conversation here?
There's a lot to add, but in our own use of the buyer intent data within Sales Intel, we use it to really figure out how to talk to the specific personas. There's several different use cases for a data intelligence tool, but based on the topic a company is surging on, it will help me understand if I should be focusing more on the marketing buying center, the sales buying center, or if it's possibly somebody in sales ops, because the topics that they care about are going to vary, and that directionally gets me headed into the right direction. I know I just used that word twice, but typically I can figure out if it's a sales leader or marketing leader based on the topic that they're searching on.
That sounds good. I see we have a question in here from Garrett, and Garrett good question. This is our next topic, which is how we implement our buy and take data, and because it has a lot of challenges into it. So I'm going to read Garrett's question, and then we can go back to the structure that we have. So Garrett said, "Big question. I would love to hear your thoughts on today. When implementing intent data for the very first time in lead sourcing, what's a reasonable improvement on lead value to anticipate it?" I hear on a podcast recently 3 to 4 times, but we haven't seen nearly that yet. So curious to hear if we are doing something wrong or if that podcast host was an edge case. Let's hear from you, Drew. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is if you get a hot piece of data that, the right persona is looking into a topic that's relevant to what you're selling, then that's very actionable. And yeah, you're going to see a huge lift there. But for the most part, like what you want to look for is, what's going to help you guys grow on a sustainable basis, what's going to be impactful. It really depends on the organization. 3 to 4x lift, that's huge. Like how are you going to get that? How are you going to get that more sustainably? Really what that means is that you're focused in on the right accounts and the right contacts at those accounts. That type of focusing and prioritizing is really going to be where you're going to see the biggest lift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris, in your experience, what are some common pitfalls companies encounter when integrating buy and take data to their sales strategy?
Yeah, I think that, it's a challenge, especially and Garrett, you're mentioning this is like the first time around. You have to take time to experiment and learn, what topics are actually relevant, which ones are the right ones. The obvious ones might seem to be the ones to track, but that might not actually be, where your buyers are spending their time. So looking at it from that perspective and understanding, hey, we're tackling these topics. We're not getting anything. Maybe we need to tweak it, adjust it. Maybe we need to look at scoring some of these and figuring out where to prioritize and all that. So I think jumping in and assuming you're going to get a huge impact day one, flipping on intent data, I don't necessarily think you're going to have that. I think 3 to 4 times is huge, regardless of when it is. So that might be a bit of an edge case, but I definitely think over time, as you refine your process, the topics you're looking at, how you're actioning those, like that's where you're going to start to see better results. So I think some of the pitfalls are, just jumping in and thinking, hey, we're going to flip this on and it's going to make a huge impact, or we're going to flip this on and doing this for the first time, we know exactly how it's going to go. And like, you don't. And don't try comparing yourself to anybody else either, because you don't know their level of maturity with intent data. And you also don't know what industry they're in or who they are selling to. And I think that is a huge impact as well. Different individuals have different ways of buying, especially when you break it down by persona. So don't assume that what they're doing is going to necessarily be relevant to you.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Amy, what are the pitfalls that you usually see working with companies at Sales Intel? And if you can answer Garrett Cast's question, is 3 to 4 too much?
Yeah, so it actually, the biggest pitfall I see is exactly what Garrett said. Folks that do a trial of Sales Intel and they expect to, in a 3-day or 5-day trial, that they're going to close a deal or start booking more meetings. And, it's not that easy. Buyer intent's not a silver bullet, and it's understanding how to choose the right topics, right? Which get you to folks that are early in the funnel. You want to make sure they're not too far down the funnel, because that's not typically helpful either. So what's the sweet spot on a grouping of topics? Our best practice is that you would focus on a cluster and ensure that that company is surging on at least 3 topics within a cluster before you start outreach to that company. Because if they're surging on one of your 10 topics, if you will, it's probably a false positive. It also depends on what industry you're selling into. If you're selling into the education space, buyer intent's not going to be as impactful for you as it will for, say, an IT company, because the signals coming out of universities and libraries are all over the place. And it doesn't mean that university is looking for a tool. It means somebody was writing a paper. So really understanding the ins and outs of like your personas, your industry, your topics, that's where it all starts. And then it's making sure that your messaging is aligned with those topics so that it's relevant and garners the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And it's I like this point about being mindful of the industry that you're in. I like the relation with libraries and just people is just doing some research. What do you think, Matt? How can companies like interpret those signs to avoid those traps?
Yeah, I think everyone really hit the nail on the head with everything they just shared. I think like the variables, there's just way too many to dive in and think that just intent data is going to have that huge impact. And then again, like Chris, you mentioned this, like there's so many iterations that you have to go through to find out what's going to give you that biggest lift. So yeah, that podcast, if someone just said they got intent data tool and then they 3-4x, like either they got very lucky or they're lying or they're selling an intent data tool.
Or
The like
from
science
zero.
experiment iterations. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of different things that can lead to that, but realistically, like you need to understand what works for your specific business model, your industry, your personas that you sell to. Amy, you talked about education. Like we sell to finance, but we have a lot of content on our website that's just very high level generic finance stuff, which is great. But then again, we get a million false positives. So we get people that just want to know about rule of 40 or month end close, and they're nowhere near trying to buy a tool like Mosaic, but they're just learning and they're educating themselves. And so a lot of false positives, a lot of iterations that need to be fixed. And again, like from scoring your leads to your outreach in the process to get there, there's a million different pathways that you have to really figure out before you do see a substantial lift like 3 to 4x.
Yeah, that
I wanted,
sounds really
I
good.
wanted, I wanted
Go
to
ahead.
add one thing to that. Amy, one of the things that you said was really impactful, I feel like, and I want to just double down on it. We're talking about a depth of data that is actionable, that you can actually use to start the conversation. If you can get to that point where you have actionable data that you've tested and is actually proving results, that's the map. I just wanted to like reiterate what you said because I feel like that's such an important piece.
And I think just to add something to that as well, to go off what Amy you were talking about is, and I mentioned it slightly before and didn't get into it more, but you need to figure out what direction you're taking. And Amy, you had highlighted, hey, before we actually do some active outreach through, let's say, an SDR, like we need to be searching on multiple topics in that cluster. And if not, that doesn't mean the data isn't actionable, but maybe on the marketing side, you've got a program to grab some of these folks in this space and feed them a little bit more and push them down the funnel a little bit until they are ready to get an SDR reaching out. So it's not, and that again, like the pitfall of expecting it to flip on and make a difference. It's not, oh, somebody clicked on our website, go call them and see what happens. It's really having a plan in place that's going to allow you to execute and figure out where you need to push a lead down the funnel a bit more and where you can actually grab your phone and start booking those meetings.
Yeah, so I'll come back on that too. So one of the initial questions was, what are the different types of intent data? And now we're kind of getting into that first party versus third party world. And if someone comes to your website, right, that's your own first party intent. But layering that with a third party intent like Bombora can really give you a clue to, hey, did they come to my website to download a white paper, or did they come because they're truly interested in my product? Because we can see what other topics they're surging on. And that's a behavioral intent. There's also predictive intent, which is going to be even further up the funnel than our behavioral intent. And, that's kind of saying like, all right, we know companies A, B, and C got funding, bought a CRM, hired SDRs. The next thing they did was buy a data provider. So here's a company that did actions 1, 2, and 3. They haven't started searching for a data provider, but we're going to guess they will soon. And so they'll have a predictive surge. That's really great for marketers for brand building. You want to think about your first party and your down the funnel intent tools like Bombora as more as like demand harvesting. So you want to know where the signals are coming from before you craft the message you're sending them as well. I hope I explained that well.
I think you did. Everyone is nodding. And I don't see any questions in the chat. So audience, keep the questions coming. Garrett, thank you so much for this question. The conversation was really good. Let's move on a little bit to implementing buyer intent data, because it also has a lot of challenges to it. From understanding what the data signals mean to prioritizing accounts correctly, there's a lot to navigate. Chris, in your experience, what are some... Oops, sorry. I am talking about accuracy, because accuracy is very important. That's what Amy just mentioned. When it comes to intent data, accuracy is very important. Amy, you touch using clusters of intent topics to understand a true signal. Could you expand on how combining multiple intent topics enhance the occurrence of our intent data?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a story. We have a customer who is in the aeronautic, like government space, right? And a few years ago, there was some satellite or something that blew up. I don't remember the specific event, so forgive me. But they called us and they said, "What is going on? Your buyer intent is broken. It's showing us all these companies that are nowhere within our ICP. They would never be buying like aerodynamic space equipment. Something's broken." Well, no, it wasn't broken. It was just that these companies had a huge surge in that one topic because something happened in the news. So if they had required 3 to 5 topics in order to see that company be surfaced as a company with intent, it would have eliminated all of those companies researching that one topic because there was something compelling that happened in the news that day or that week. So using topics, again, will get you directionally more accurate and eliminate those false positives where you had one-off somebody researching something just out of curiosity. It also indicates that there's multiple people within an organization searching around the same topics and consuming information around the same type of solution. So again, more indicative of a true buying cycle as opposed to just curiosity. But at the end of the day, buyer intent shows us there was a compelling event. It doesn't mean I'm ready to buy something, but an event happened that made me do research. So you want to go into it thinking, let me learn about the event. What's driving this, right? Think about it like discovery, not like, ooh, they're going to sign a contract. Is that helpful?
Chris, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that because I think we've talked a lot about, implementing intent data, but I think you also have to look at then the adoption rate of the teams that you have that are using it. And so, it's kind of this two-part piece where, to Amy's point, right, if you're not setting it up properly, you don't have the proper data points, and you are not finding the right way to action it, what you're going to have is a bunch of folks who are getting this intent data going, it sucks, it doesn't work, why am I spending my time doing this? And then I'm going to stop using it. And then you're never going to see that value add. And I think intent data in a lot of circles on LinkedIn and all that's getting a bit of a bad rep because what happens is, like right now, every SaaS platform I have demoed since coming to Sherpa will throw intent data in, and it's not clear where it's coming from. It's not clear how you should use it. So they just kind of toss it in and they expect you to figure it out. And to our discussion today, it's clear that intent data is not that thing that you just go, oh, this is easy. Let me just toss this on top of what I got, and it's going to make, give me a lot of value. So people are going into it, trying to use it, not figuring it out, not getting value out of it. And they go like, I don't really want to do this anymore. And they stop using it. And then that's where you see that fall off. People don't know, what to do with it. And so it gets that bad reputation. You do need to have implementation that goes far beyond just throwing it in and saying like, we're going to score our prospects now, you're going to get the intent data for them, go figure it out. Like that will not work long term because you will lose buy-in pretty quickly.
Matt, I see you nodding. Do you have anything to add in there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, like I always use the like hypothesis and science, and I'm not a scientist at all. I'm a film person actually, so very opposite. But I think it's really relevant to everything that's been mentioned here. And yeah, if you get really, really good results quickly, like again, that's very exciting and that's lucky, to be honest. But the reality is like you constantly need to be going back and looking at like the data and testing. Okay, was that hypothesis that we had correct? Like, are we looking at the right signals? And again, as you continue to go through the iterations, whether it's scoring of individual prospects or the account tiering itself, like, and again, it's hard. I know there's a lot of bandwidth issues, especially in the startup environment, but that should be a 6 months or every few quarters, you should be looking back at that and making sure that you are on the right path. And then you just go kind of layers deeper. Again, like you need to solve the problem consistently and over and over. So are these right intent signals? Yes, they are, because we're hitting the right people and we do see really good signals. Cool. Now let's go down a layer deeper. Is the messaging that our team is doing, or the process of how they're following up with these people, is that accurate? Is there changes that we need to make there? But usually it is at the beginning, that top part of like, are we looking at the right stuff? Are these false positives like Amy's been sharing? Because you're going to run into a lot of those. And to Chris's point, like as BDRs do 5-6 different tools, like if something's not giving them that like quick win, they usually kind of back away from it. That's just the reality of it. Like if you have a cold call tool and you're not hammering the phones and getting people booked, you're going to go, okay, well, I'm getting success on LinkedIn, so I'm just going to keep doing that. So you need to let them know that it is a long-term project, and there will be a lot of, kind of roller coaster bumps. And hopefully, again, the point is that you're just moving in that growth, quarter over quarter and learning consistently. But it's not going to be success overnight. And it's something that, it's a larger project that I think a lot of people take on when they just think, cool, we got this tool that's going to help us immediately. There's a lot of heavy lifting and work behind the scenes before you get the impact that I think a lot of people want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, data is basically information, and then you have to use it wisely, right? Drew, how do you ensure accuracy when you're using data in your day-to-day?
I don't think I'm going to say anything that hasn't been said already, but it's about iteration. Like you're gonna get a lot of information. Is it actionable? Does it move the needle? If yes, then great. Double down, figure out what's working, and try to continue to hone in on what data is actually the most impactful. Is it not doing anything for you? Well, don't chuck it out the window. Like that's when it's an opportunity to go back to the drawing board. Like strategically, what are we looking for? And what do we know is going to be impactful for the buying journey for the people that we're engaging with? And then if you can iterate and just continue to iterate and really start to focus on understanding, hey, if we learn that the CEO is looking for this piece of information, then we can start the marketing journey to get them to move forward. Or if we find that all of the reps are asking about something specific, we know that leads to us getting engagement, which helps us, create an opportunity. That's something that's actionable. But if you're like, oh, we got data that somebody was Googling this topic and we never can actually turn that into an opportunity, it's, are you capturing the right data? Are you iterating? Are you being able to figure out what are we capturing that's actually helping us move the ball forward? So I think that's the main piece.
Yep. Amy, we got a question here from the audience. Jake is asking, how do you use buyer intent data to tailor your sales and marketing messaging?
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so that's a great question. We have the keys to the castle, right? We drink our own champagne. So we have 3 streams of intent data, and we have unfettered access to the amount of companies we can return in a search and the amount of topics that we can track. So not everybody has that luxury unless you have a really large budget for business intelligence marketing solutions. So we have nearly 100 topics that we track. And we have them in clusters, like I mentioned earlier, right? And we know that certain clusters are associated with certain responsibilities. So if we're seeing, and this is just using ourselves as an example because I'm so familiar with our topics, if we see things around B2B firmographic APIs, data enrichment, CRM enhancement, things like that, we know that we probably need to be targeting a RevOps leader. And RevOps leaders care a lot about lead scoring, lead routing, and accurate, complete data and enrichment. So my messaging is all going to be about how we can enrich account data with accurate firmographics to give you better lead scoring and routing to then create more efficiency in your pipeline, right? If they're surging on topics like buyer intent, customer acquisition cost, lead generation software, demand generation, I know it's probably a marketing leader that's got the problem. So my messaging is going to be all around building top of funnel and demand gen and how you brand yourself. If it's sales acceleration, sales velocity, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, decision makers, B2B data, I know it's probably a sales team that's struggling, and I'm going to be hitting up, Drew and Matt and Chris and going after the business development leaders and the VPs of sales. And I'm going to be talking about how we can make your sellers more efficient to, again, give them more time to generate pipeline instead of doing research and trying to find contacts on LinkedIn. So it's all about understanding who's probably searching based on the topic, understanding the pain point of your persona, and then understanding how your feature fixes that pain point. And if you can't connect all of those dots, buyer intent will not be ultimately that successful for you. And we do it for a living, and it still took us a few years to perfect it. But once we did, We saw customer lifetime value increase by about 40%, 50% increase in renewal rates, and about a 33% increase on our ACV. And those are real numbers from Sales Intel.
Great. That sounds like magic. Drew, I see that you're agreeing a lot with what Amy is saying. Do you have anything to add on how to make your marketing campaigns better with sales, with intent data?
No, I'm just going to reiterate what Amy said. I mean, it's got to be actionable. Like, is this something that's relevant to them? And then is it going to help us start a conversation? So once you do get the right data, you're like, okay, we're finding that these are the signals that actually help us create an opportunity. Then you leverage those signals to craft the language. And so then already the signals and the language will be tightly intertwined already. So yeah, if it's actionable, that's going to be what's going to help you get massive lifts like what she was just outlining. Yeah.
Chris, do you have any experience using intent data to cater like the marketing message for your events and company?
So I kind of had what I would say is a fairly, I'll call it typical, sorry, Amy, a sales experience with intent data where it kind of got thrown at me. I had actually just joined an org and they're like, here's intent data. And I was leading a team of BDRs going, cool, I don't know what to do with this. And we had a brilliant director of demand gen. Maylee, if you're out in the universe somewhere, like shout out to you. And she literally sat me down and kind of explained exactly what Amy was talking about. We know that if somebody is doing ABC, they're probably interested in this. They're probably this type of persona. We're going to feed them this type of either ads or white papers or whatever. If it is DEF, then we're going to send them in this direction. And she literally had essentially was like a flow chart mapped out to walk me through, what we do with what they do with the intent data, how it leverages or how they leverage it for their marketing campaigns, and then where kind of they slot BDRs in and go, cool. Well, if they did, or they're looking this stuff up and we send them this way and then they do this, it'd be a great time for your BDR to reach out and start talking about this topic. If they don't do that and go this direction instead, well, we probably messed something up. So we'll give them 2 more steps and then we can kind of engage with them. So like this crazy like mad scientist flow chart written up, but it really clarified intent data and how it should be used and where the value was. Because otherwise, if you're looking at it like point in time, one piece of data, you're never going to get there. You have to look at it bigger picture for sure.
Yeah. Matt, I see you're agreeing. Do you have anything to add to the conversation here?
Not a lot. I think, again, it's all similar in the sense of this was actually new for me as well until recently. I didn't use it, but Chris, you just kind of really struck a chord with me there. Of in the past, we've used just one random piece of data point, and that's kind of what the team has done. Like, okay, Drew signed up for our webinar. There we go. Like, now he's getting his webinar drip campaign or sequence or whatever. And then recently, a year or so ago, Mosaic, we brought on Qualified, and I don't know how many people use Qualified here, but we were using it more on the chat tool side and pouncing on people. And again, I don't really appreciate being like randomly video chatted or chatted on a site, but I'm also a salesperson, so I understand it. CFOs definitely do not enjoy that whatsoever. So we quickly realized like, okay, this chat tool is not great for us, but they have signals, which again is intent data. And so now we can see their entire path from ads that they've clicked on and web pages they've been on and what they really care about. And so we just kind of have to piece together all the information and all the context and their entire journey and story as a prospect and as an account. And now our messaging can be a million times more relevant, timely. And again, we talk a lot about prioritization. We can say like, is this just somebody out here who's trying to learn a few things because they're new in seat, or is this somebody who's actually looking for a tool that is going to help them with their financial planning? So yeah, nothing super crazy, but I do think it's interesting to now get a much larger picture where in the past there was so much of just like very one-off reasons for reaching out that again, there are a lot of false positives there and not a good use of your time.
Yeah, so we're entering like a little bit in the application of intent data, right? How sales teams out there can use the data effectively, especially now that the market is very iffy, very unstable. We have a lot of false positives and false signs come to us. So let's talk a little bit about what sales teams should be doing right now with intent data. Let's start with Drew. Drew, what do you think sales teams should approach intent data coming into 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, one of the things that we've sort of all been highlighting here today is, do you have a process around iterating the intent data you're capturing such that you can compare the results of that intent data to something that you know is actually going to move the needle? So, if you don't have the process in place now, think about what it takes to quarterly iterate on what intent data you guys are capturing and how it's moving the ball forward. If you don't have that, like, that's my number one call out. Like, that's what you should be focused on. We're going to meet, in 3 weeks for our first review. And then in 3 months after that, we're going to meet for our next review. And we're going to take a look at the signals we're capturing, how much it's been impactful, and what other signals we might need to be looking at to help us move the ball forward. And then how we're using those signals to craft language that is directly applicable to the people we're reaching out to.
What about you, Chris? How do you think sales teams can start using intent data more effectively in 2024?
I mean, I think for the most part, I'm actually going to just repeat a whole lot of what Drew's talking about here. But Matt had mentioned something before too about the scientific side of things, and I do actually have a scientific background. I studied kinesiology for what it was worth ages ago, but I'm still a firm believer in kind of that scientific method, right? Like, let's come up with something that is very tangible, and let's call it an experiment and say, great, we're going to use this cluster of intent data. We're going to run with it for a month, and we're gonna, take a look at what we did with it, what outreach we did, what the messaging looked like, all of that stuff, and then let's sit down and let's bring it together and see, did anything change? What were the results? What were the responses? Like, it really does need to be a more all-encompassing program than just here's some intent data, figure it out. Like, there needs to be a plan behind it, and for me, it's going to be a little bit of trial and error as you iterate and hone things in, but like, it needs to be something that is structured and valuable so that you can make assumptions and assertions based on what you've done and actually improve it and then keep kind of moving forward. Otherwise, you're again going to be running around with it. You're not necessarily going to see results, and you will lose engagement with the team internally really quickly.
Sorry, I was muted. Matt, how sales teams can effectively use intent data moving into 2024 sales cycle?
Yeah, I feel like we're just like in this like echo
Just
chamber, which is not a bad thing.
yeah.
I think it's more validation. But again, it's like, what's the first thing you should do is, if you do have that tool, you need to go back to the drawing board and look at your data and say, are we doing the right things? What do we need to change? If you do feel like you're in a good spot, and what I mean by that is, like, you already have done some of these iterations and it's moving in the right direction, then yeah, you're going the layers deeper and saying, like, cool, now do we need to change our messaging? Do we need to change our process? I don't think there's a whole lot more to add. It's just, again, the importance of this tool is more so in the way that you're navigating it and analyzing it and being strategic with it than it is about, like, just intent data at a high level. It's really kind of a powerful tool that, in the right hands of the right people who are motivated to make it work, you'll see a huge lift. If it's not in the right hands, like to Chris's point, you're going to just lose the buy-in, and people aren't going to really care much about it, and are going to move on to the next tool. So yeah, you need to be going back to the drawing board, checking out if it's working, using the hard data that you have, and create a new hypothesis if you need to, and take it from there.
Awesome. Amy, you are in the business of intent data. We have a question from Gina, but I do want you to give us some action items. What are some actions sales teams can take right now to get the most value out of intent data moving into 2024? And also, Gina's question is, what is the best way to eliminate false positive results when using intent data in your GTM strategy?
Yes. So what can sales teams do? I'll answer that first. And I guess this is more advice for those of you that don't have an intent provider or are maybe looking for some additional supplemental streams of buyer intent or looking to make a change. Not all intent data is created equal. There's different types of technology that can power intent data. And we partner with Bombora as a third party because they are the cream of the crop. And we are not the only data provider that has a partnership with Bombora. Lots of data providers do. I would strongly encourage you to look at the difference between Bombora's Surge Score and Bidstream intent data and how those work on the back end. Secondly, it has to be paired with an incredibly well-defined ICP. If you don't know what types of companies you really should be focusing on, intent data doesn't matter. So go with a strong provider, make sure you have a well-defined ICP and a well-defined strategy before you even try to use intent data. In terms of eliminating false positives, the best thing that you can do, quite frankly, is iterate on your topics, make sure that you have a cluster of topics that really resonates, with the ICP you're looking to break into, as well as the personas you sell to. And then understand if there's any industries you sell into that would have a higher rate of false positive for whatever reason, right? Like the education example that I gave. Do some research, talk to some experts. And then third, right, when you're evaluating providers, ask them, how will you help me operationalize this data into my go-to-market strategy? Because there's a lot of providers out there that will sell you the tool and be like, here you go, best of luck, have a good time, talk to you at renewal, right? And there's providers out there that provide white glove customer service to help you get ROI from the tool, and will work with you to iterate and make those adjustments over time to your topics and your clusters. So yeah, do your research, pick a good partner, have a good strategy. I don't know that I've said anything different, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that sounds good. Does anyone have another action item that they would recommend, Chris?
I just wanted to add to the pick a good partner aspect of it. And again, I'm going to beat this dead horse, this poor guy. But again, I've since coming to Sherpa and starting to build out some of the tech stack, I evaluated some data providers and I evaluated a few different things. And yeah, they're just willing to slap intent data into whatever their offering is and say like, and we give you intent data. And to Amy's point, unless you have especially if you're doing it for the first time, if you've done it before, sure, maybe you can take that and make it work. But if you're doing it for the first time, just grabbing whatever is dumped in for essentially free to whatever you're currently buying is not necessarily going to set you up for success. So if you are going to say, hey, I want to do intent, do it right. Don't just say, hey, they're throwing in intent. Let me go try and set something up. Like, do it right. Set yourself up for success by picking the right partner and by being focused on what you're trying to accomplish with your intent data.
It's just like cooking, right? You go to a restaurant, they're using very good ingredients. And if you go home and do the same recipe with not so good ingredients, it's not going to come up the same way. We have another question from Mark, and I'm going to ask this to Drew. Are there other use cases for intent besides building top of funnel?
Absolutely. So if you've got your intent data sort of really focused in, from my perspective, well, let's see, that's it. Besides top of funnel, I mean, from my perspective, one of the most impactful things you can use, yeah, Amy's probably the best person to ask you about this, would be prioritizing your accounts. Like, it's still top of funnel, you're still generating pipeline, but like there's the inbound motion, there's the outbound motion. And so if you're focusing in on who you're going to reach out to based on the signals you're pulling in, I think that's going to have a really big impact. But then I'm sure there's use cases for renewals, which it sounds like Amy's team had a really strong renewal piece. That's probably much more interesting.
All right, come on, Amy, bring us home.
There's a couple of use cases that we've implemented at Sales Intel, and one of them is exactly that, to help arrest churn and get out in front of churn. So Sales Intel is a topic, Zoom Info is a topic, B2B data is a topic. And so my account managers on a weekly basis are running their list of accounts against the intent topics that indicate somebody is looking elsewhere, so we can get in front of churn before, and it's helped. We've saved renewals. Kind of a more fringe use case is around events. There are a lot of conferences that are intent topics, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get attendee or sponsor lists of these big events. So Dreamforce, for example, SaaStr, these are topics within buyer intent tools. So you can go see what companies are surging on those conferences right before. We don't know that they're attending, but maybe they are, right? And we can use that as a pre-conference call list to try to set some in-person meetings or get some conversations going around. Hey, will you be at Dreamforce? I'm going to be at Dreamforce. Let's have a coffee. So that's kind of our probably least predominant use case, but our customers love that idea. They really have embraced that.
That sounds really fun. Chris, do you have any use cases that you can mention of using intent data not only for top funnel?
A good portion of what I've used intent data for is top of funnel. I think to Amy's point, renewals also came up, and we would cross-reference that when I was leading a BDR team. Actually, if we were seeing intent pop up for companies that were current customers, we would kind of funnel that back to our account management team. So that was something that came up that we partnered on a little bit. But I also think just engagement as you're going through the funnel, depending on what the topics are, you're able to just see like, hey, are they still researching? What are they doing? Where are they going? Where are they spending their time? Like, how engaged are they in the sales process, or are they really hands off? So you can follow it down the funnel a little bit. We, again, aligned it a bit with marketing to try and see like, hey, what are we feeding them as they go through the funnel? Because, a big push we had in one of my previous roles was like marketing's function does not stop the second that they become an opportunity. There are opportunities to partner down the line. And I think that getting some intent data around that helps continue to gauge where they're spending their time and who's looking at what. Because we forget sometimes as well that, Amy broke down some of the personas before, but, it could be that a sales team is struggling, but like RevOps is going to get involved if you're buying a tool. So at what point do they get involved? What are they looking at? Can we cater some messaging, some content, something for them? Because they might get involved, and not every RevOps team is going to be necessarily out front in front of the potential vendors. So how do we make sure we're engaging with everybody who's looking at a solution in our space, even if we're not actively talking to them one-on-one in the meetings, in the calls, in the demos, and all that?
Awesome. We are almost at the end of this conversation. So Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot and I'm going to ask you, what is one key takeaway that you want the audience to leave this event with today?
Yeah, I'm glad I got that one because I feel like Chris, Drew, or Amy would have taken what I would have said, but I'm going to just go back to like iterate, iterate. Don't think that you're going to just do this once or twice or three or four. It's a living, breathing thing that you need to constantly be working on. So if it's not working right now, doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It means look at the data, make another hypothesis, and get after it.
All right, Drew, you're next. What is the key takeaway you want the audience to walk away with?
Clearly define your ICP. Think very carefully about what you're tracking and why, and how that's going to help you lead to having meaningful conversations that move the ball forward. It's got to be one, then the next, then the next. And if it's not working, it's not because the whole thing's broken. It's because you need to iterate.
I'm going to make it difficult for Amy, so I'm going to ask her last. Chris, what is your key takeaway?
I'm sure she has so many takeaways. We can leave her for last. It's totally fine. I'm going to play a little bit off of what Drew was saying, and I'm going to steal a little bit about what Amy was saying before. But one key takeaway, and I think it goes back to what I said at the beginning as well, is that like intent data is not this standalone thing that just exists. You flip it on and magic happens, right? You have to have it figured out. And I think what Amy said about having your personas figured out is really important too. Like, know your personas, know what the messaging looks like, know what the pain points are, know what you're solving for, have a case study or two ready to go. Like, you need to be speaking their language, because essentially what you're doing without the intent data is you're saying, hey, typically in your industry, your persona is facing this challenge, and you're probably sending that cold email anyway. Now you add the intent data in and you're like, hey, people in your industry, in your persona typically deal with this problem. And I know you're looking it up, so I have to imagine that there is something there now, right? So you're taking it from relevant and adding that timing component to it, which I think is really important with intent data.
That's a great key takeaway. Amy, what is the key takeaway you would like the audience to walk away with?
The gentleman kind of, I don't know if I think I blipped for a minute there. I think the gentleman, really covered everything. I did include a couple of sales intel case studies in our virtual booth. And those are some pretty recent real stories about customers who did exactly what we're talking about. They iterated and they worked with us, and they worked with, marketing leaders that are outside of their own organizations to get advice on how to do this right. And over time, saw great success. So don't get frustrated if it doesn't work for you right away. Consider all of the things we've talked about, who your provider is. Are you getting the support you need? Do you have an ICP? Do you understand your personas? Is your messaging good? Are your people good on the phone? If you don't have all of those things kind of swimming in the right direction, figure out which one you can improve the fastest, attack it, and then move to the next thing. And you will eventually get there.
Awesome. It's a very positive way to end our webinar. Audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Speakers, you are all fantastic. I love hearing from you and learning from you. Thank you, Paul, for attending. I see you in the chat right there. Again, this event was recorded, so you will receive a link for the recording right after this event. The Modern Sales Pros team will make sure to craft a very nice follow-up email with key takeaways and some opportunities for you. And don't forget to hit the button to request a demo with our sponsor at the top of this page. They will help you with your intent data, and you will be flying in 2024 with Sales Intel help. While the speakers and I hang out backstage, the MSP team will make sure that you will receive the follow-up email with the link and the key takeaways. And audience, thank you so much for joining us today. I will see you in the next event. Speakers, you are all fantastic. We have 3 minutes to go hang out backstage and talk a little bit more about data. We can go backstage.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
everyone.
everyone.